Welcome to Naperville Notables. I'm Liz Spencer. I'm at the beautiful Knock Knoll Nature Center, and I'm joined by Ron Orey. And we're going to talk to him about his 20 years of service. I've known you for a while. I've seen you out in the community, but I never realized you were fifth generation Naperville. So tell me a little bit about your family connection here.
The Oreys first came over to Naperville in 1844, and like you say, I'm fifth generation along the way. Most of them were early on were farmers. 3 or 4 generations prior to me were all farmers. Most of them along the east branch of the DuPage River, more in the Lisle area. There's an Orey Lane over someplace in Lisle. I don't know that there's any remnant of Orey name in any of the areas except for perhaps one on a plat out there where Springbrook Prairie Forest Preserve is. There's a picnic area, I don't know if you recognize that, along Naperville Plainfield Road. There's a parking lot and a picnic area and one of the trailheads into there. Ray and Carol Orey were one of the farmers that was still in there when the Forest Preserve took that over. And I went back and read all of the history of the correspondence back and forth between there. And there's a row of pine trees that they said, our acre of property is worth more than $69,000, I think, because we put this buffer on the north side, and those pine trees are still there if you drive into the picnic area. But that would have been Orey subdivision if they had ever developed it. So that's kind of the only remnant. During the 30s and 40s Depression area, most of the Orey farms ended up being reclaimed by the banks, foreclosed. But I grew up with my grandfather on Spring Avenue down where they've got the ready mix plant that was not there when I was growing up. There was kind of open fields. There was a spur line that ran down Ewing Street. It serviced the industrial area where the Riverwalk is now, where the Zeininger Coal and Oil Company was, and a couple other things. And that where the industrial part of Naperville started out, the Mill Street, and the folks, the downtown area was right there. But my grandfather had 2 lots there, and he had 2 lots over on Douglas Avenue. Some of my relatives lived in the house at the Douglas Avenue property, and I lived with my grandfather along with my brothers and sisters who were, it was a growing family. We ended up with 12, I've got 11 brothers and sisters. There's 12 kids in our family.
Wow.
I'm not married, but I've got 42 nieces and nephews, so the rest of my brothers and sisters have been rather profligate and so forth. So.
And where do you fall in that 1 to 12 line?
I'm second. I have a sister that's a year older than me.
Wow.
And the rest are, all 10 are younger than me. And so I've changed probably as many diapers as most parents have along the way, taking care of my younger siblings over the years. But my grandfather had these 2 lots, one of which was all garden. And he had a chicken coop, and he had a rabbit hutch. He had all kinds of fruit trees. He had strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, grapes. That whole yard was very productive. And then for the Douglas Avenue, that whole other lot was all farm. To this day, my sister refuses to dig potatoes because she has bad memories of digging potatoes in the garden. So she'll buy them and eat them, but she won't dig them anymore. So, but I kind of enjoyed putzing around in the garden.
I think, I would say that's putting it mildly, kind of enjoy putzing around with the gardener. So you really, your family roots really kind of bring gardening right into who you are today.
Yeah, I think so. When I went into the Army in '66, and I was in the Army for 21 years and got out in '88, I knew I was coming back to Naperville. I spent my whole life in Naperville. That was my address, a home of record in the Army, they call it. And so I looked around and I bought pre-construction a condominium, and while that was being built, I went back to a local community college But as soon as I got back into Naperville and had put all my books on the shelf and furniture arranged, I was looking for something to do, and I ended up finding they needed some help at Naperville Golf Course, so I climbed on a brand new John Deere tractor and gang mower and was out mowing, and that was great being outdoors. And as an employee of the Park District, I got a break on the garden plot thing, so I went over there and rented a garden plot, but then I decided I didn't know that much about gardening. When I retired from the Army in '88, I said, I don't know that much about computers. So when I went to the community college down in North Carolina, where I was last stationed, I started computer programming courses and finished up at the College of DuPage. So I got an associate degree there on computer programming. And then I said, don't know much about gardening, so I took a horticulture curriculum and got an associate degree in horticulture. So I went from grad school back to undergrad and enjoyed my benefits of the GI Bill over at College of DuPage. Got some additional farming and gardening experience.
Well, and I want to take a little step back. So you were in the Army, and in the Army you also, you got to travel a lot. That was
I moved 17 times in 21 years. I spent 4 years at Fort Bragg. I spent 3 years at Nuremberg, Germany. I spent 3 years in Mons, Belgium. So you can see the interims on some of those were just a matter of months that I picked up and moved again. So.
Wow. And during that time, you picked up photography?
When I went back the second time to Europe, we were chatting and I said I went to Bavaria first of all in '67 to '70. And I went back to Europe in '79 to the military headquarters for NATO, which is called SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe. Everything's acronyms in the Army. And that was just outside of Brussels. And I said, I didn't take a whole lot of pictures the first time I was here. Too many good times and between the guest houses and skiing in the Alps and a few other things, Oktoberfest in Munich. I was close enough to all of those to really have a good time. So I walked into the post exchange and I said, I need to be able to take some pictures, sell me a camera. So I spent a couple hours going through all the features of an SLR, which I didn't know anything about. First row of film, I took a couple of test shots. In the first row of film, I went up to Keukenhof Tulip Festival. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's kind of world famous. And that was kind of good pictures. And I said, this is pretty easy. So I've been taking pictures ever since. And I took slides until digital got far enough along. I've got 28,000 slides in the library right now. And
what are you going to do with those?
Yeah. Well, they're on the shelf. I look at them every now and then. They're just good fond memories. I use some of them occasionally. The other thing when I retired is I've done a lot of traveling along historic trails. There are 19 national historic trails in the national park system. Everything from Lewis and Clark to Selma to Montgomery, 2,400 miles to 40 miles. And they commemorate some historical events. Oregon Trail, people are familiar with that, California Trail, Mormon Trail, Santa Fe Trail, a number of those. And when I retired, I said, I need to see some of this country that I'd flown back and forth during my military career. I need to see some of this country. So got the camera, loaded the trail guides, the journals into the car, and I spent about a month every year on the road following one of the historic trails.
And how many did you get them all, or are you still?
Well, I've done 16 of the 19.
Wow.
Iditarod, and then there's one in southern Hawaii I haven't got to, and then more recently Washington, Rochambeau has been designated a historic trail for the 1776 to 83 War of Independence, so that's been designated. So I got East Coast I got to do, and Hawaii, and I don't know if I'll get to the Iditarod because that's not too accessible. Most of them have designated auto routes,
Okay.
suggested auto routes. The National Park Service does a good job. You know, I write to the superintendent of the trails and tell me where I should go, what I should see, help me out on what I should read, and they provide a tremendous amount of help. So I may make the
You may make
18 of the 19, you know, so
That's awesome.
we will see.
Did the involvement with the Park District and the love of gardening and farming kind of motivate you in 1995 to run for Park Board?
Not really. I was working out at the golf course, and I
Okay.
was doing, after I got my degree in ornamental horticulture, I saw an advertisement that they were soliciting, the University of Illinois Extension was soliciting folks for the Master Gardener program. And at that time, they had like a dozen people.
Okay.
It's now got up like 120 for DuPage.
And let me ask,
Yeah.
I hear the term Master Gardener Program, and I think other people hear that because it's a very prestigious title. What does that mean? What is it?
The program, go back to the meaning of extension. Land grant colleges, and there are land grant college in each of the 50 states,
Okay.
by charter have to provide agriculture or horticultural advice free to farmers.
Right.
That's the way
Okay.
they started out.
Right, and that would
And
be University of
extension is
Illinois.
part of that. Master
Right.
Gardeners is kind of the home
Gotcha.
thing, and to complement the farming type of thing. So Master Gardeners do extensive training, about 60 hours of training, and they're obligated to provide 60 hours of volunteer work back in various forms along the way. I did that for 22 years. This year I'm not. I've gone up to the other phase of that, Master Naturalist, which is also a part of the extension. And that required extensive training, about a 10-week period of time, down to Yorkville once a week for 10 weeks, and then again 60 hours of payback. And the reason I dropped out of the Master Gardener part of it and concentrated on the Master Naturalist is both of those jobs, I was over 400 hours of volunteer time, and it was getting to be too much. So,
Just a little.
yeah, so.
Well, and I think that with everybody's movement for conservation and green, that the naturalist is the next step in that.
Yeah, I never answered your question on how I got to run for
No,
the
you didn't.
park
I was
board.
going to come back around, but I appreciate that.
So I was working out at the golf course in '89 to mowing the grass for a couple of years, and then Ed Provo, who was the head pro there, said, "I understand you took some computer courses," and I said, "Yeah," and computers were just coming about, so I went into the clubhouse and helped them. I put my MBA to work at $5 an hour to get business manager cheap. I set up computer stuff, budgeting, personnel, registration, all sorts of things on a little old, real slow thing using BASIC language as a programming language. And I worked there until '95. And then at '95, they said they're expanding the park board. There's no golfers on the park board. So we need a golfer on there. So the folks at the golf course encouraged me to run. So I spent an exorbitant amount of money, about $100 for a campaign, and name recognition, I think, helped me get elected at that time. So that's where it come from. It wasn't gardening. No.
I think Gary, right. I think I'm sitting here surprised a little bit that I didn't. It makes sense that you're mowing the grass at the golf course. I would be taking golf,
Yep.
taking advantage of that free golf there too. So they got you on the board.
Yeah.
Who was do you remember who the executive director was at the time?
At the time, Glenn Eakey had put in his retirement papers.
Okay.
He'd been there 15 years. And if you kind of look at the history, that's when it started some turbulence, because it took a while to find Ray McGurry, somebody with his credentials. I've seen 9 or 10 different executive directors in the 20 years that I've been around there. So Glenn retired, and the 5 department heads at that time all had about 20 years experience. Most of them went on from there, either retired or went on to other jobs. So there was really a dearth of Naperville Park District experience on there. And so when We started to rebuild along the way. We probably didn't do the best job in choosing some of the successors for Glenn. So it took us a while to get through that. And it was a kind of what they call the revolving door of executive directors.
Well, sometimes it just takes a while to find the right person.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit, you mentioned that when you came back that you went over to the garden plots and plotted and laid out your garden. Was that the spark for you for the love of the garden plots? And you're kind of the garden plot guy. When I think of garden plots, I think of Ron, and I think of the Park District.
Yeah, I kind of lived out there. I got to know a lot of the people. It's as much social as it is productive as far as raising vegetables along the way. So, got to know the neighbors about that same time frame in the mid to late 90s. I joined the men's garden club at that time, and they had formed because most of the other garden clubs met during the day, and these guys wanted something at night when they could be available, and they were hands-on gardens. The Naperville Garden Club does a great job of Cup of Cheer, but they meet at White Eagle on Wednesday, and none of the guys were able to meet that. In fact, the ladies asked me to join their club. I said, I don't think I've got time for that. But the Men's Garden Club was a small group of like 20 or 30. In fact, when I got there, they were thinking of closing up. They had just a few bucks left in that. And we were able to energize it. They got some new members. A couple years later, they had to change their name because they allowed women in along the way. And we had I think one of our first presidents was a lawyer, and she helped set up the corporate entity along the way and really made it a viable concern. So it's now called the Naperville Community Gardeners. They were called the Naperville Community Garden Club, confused with the Naperville Garden Club, so they called it Naperville Community Gardeners. It's still got some confusion to it. So they helped me, continue to foster my understanding of gardening along the way. I entered their show kind of reluctantly one year, and then a couple years later added a few more things, and by golly, my onions won Best of Show one year. So that was a grand prize. No vegetable had ever won before or since. So the onions took that.
Best of Show. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So when you were back at that time with the garden plots, were they as many garden plots? I mean, there's something like 500 now, or
yeah, there was probably in the neighborhood of 400.
Okay.
And there wasn't that area to the south.
Okay.
And then they expanded the area to the south several years later. I think the garden clubs actually started out at Springbrook Golf Course out in the driving range 35, 40 years ago. And then when they opened up the driving range, they moved them over to the West Street area along the way. I don't know what had been there before. My brother-in-law said they used to chase foxes and pickup trucks over through that area. So that was when it was out in the boonies. So they added the south, and then they added a section of organic in the southern plot. And then when we had that big confab about the Martin Mitchell thing, and I think you probably sat in on some of those meetings, and it was all turf issues. Nobody was willing to say, let's all get together and kumbaya, have a understanding of what we're going to do with this whole thing. So the gardeners, many of them thought that they got short shrift on the thing when the fields went in. So there's still some hard feelings on that.
It's tough, but I was amazed at that time the passion for the garden plots and the gardeners themselves. They talked about community the community that people have with gardening. And talk to me a little bit about that, because I think many of us, a majority of us, don't garden, or we have maybe a tomato plant in a pot on our patio or something like that, or we go to the farmer's market.
Yep.
So, but what is it about growing something from seed or from small startup plant that makes it so worthwhile?
Well, to me, it still has an aura of mystery. How does that little seed become that giant sunflower, or, one of the picture on the wall there along the way. So that's a mystery, and I think I still have that childlike attitude to the whole thing, and it's always satisfying to be able to raise just something that you say, I raised that whole salad along the way. And it's also, like I said, it's got a social aspect to it. So it's good exercise. Some people find it good therapy. You know, you can get out there, turn your mind off, forget about your worries, and just take it out on that patch of weeds or whatever it is. Or you can, you know, plant that tree and get a sore back out of it too along the way. So there's many aspects along that I find in gardening. And Park District has got an evaluation process that they go through, that they measure against a set of standards, and I think gardening comes out near the top on achieving most of the value system that the Park District is looking for. So.
And I never find that. I always want to garden, but I never find that stress-free or let my mind go, because I'm just so anxious for that little plant to grow, and so I think impatience, you know, gives me that black thumb instead of that green thumb. You have also been a mentor to Eagle Scouts, and you have helped a lot of other gardeners along the way. What is it with that education aspect? I know it's part of your Master Gardener thing, but there's also, people talk a lot about how much you've helped them and that you really enjoy it, and they have really benefited. What does it give to you?
Well, it's nice to hear. You know, just seeing the light come on, you know,
You're
or
gonna have to
people
work a little harder on me. But that's okay.
They got the
They got the lights on. I still think we're gonna have to work on it. So.
But just seeing the light come on when they recognize that, there's a lot of science to it and a lot of technique, but there's an awful lot of art to it. And if you're looking for perfection, you probably won't achieve that. You know, even though some of these dahlia lovers or rose growers are looking for the perfect petal and go to great lengths to do that, I'm not quite that intense about the whole thing. I like to raise a variety of things along the way. My emphasis these days is on native plants which is sustainable aspects. So you can learn about the science of soil and botany and all those things, or you can just put the seed in the ground and dump some water and fertilizer, as those, you know, the green thumb 4-year-olds do, and have the same level of satisfaction that they have. And that's where I'm at.
I need to take a lesson from that 4-year-old. I get a little bit more stressed out about wanting it to happen. So I remember taking a workshop from you as a Park District when I first moved to Naperville, because I wanted to do a little gardening. I have a nice sunny patch in my backyard that I need to do. I need to put a garden in there. But there was a young man in there, and he did just that. He had decided he had a backyard, he had some lettuce, and he grew this great lettuce thing, and he was just carefree, and then he came to you for some more education. I thought, well, I wish I was that carefree, but I'm not. I'm not that at all. I think that you mentioned the native plants and the sustainability. I think the Park District has really become a leader in that in the community. Why is it important for the Park District to be that leader?
Well, I think it's kind of a vacuum. I think the Forest Preserve has got a lot of land, and their role is preservation, and they do a great job along the way. The city has got a lot of parkways and a lot of green space. Homeowners associations got the ponds and, you know, the open area that they find kind of a pain in the neck and in their pocketbook. So the Park District is really the only entity that can bring them all together. And I think we've shifted our emphasis from all green, mowed turf to more natural plantings. Several years ago, I asked a friend of mine, Jack Pizzo, who runs out in Leland, runs a restoration and native plant nursery out there, to see if he'd come in and make a presentation to the Park District. And he sent one of his sidekicks in, Andy, who's now one of the presidents of 4 companies. He's subdivided he's very successful. He does most of the stuff for the Chicago Park District. Wow. He came in and he presented a chart that showed the payback period for converting turf to native plants is 3 years. So your maintenance costs go down to a level where your installation costs have been paid back in 3-year period of time. So we've got a lot of places along the edges of ponds and streams and rivers that we own or are responsible for. We got a lot of slopes that are hard to mow, that are not used for ball fields. So over the past several years, we've converted an awful lot of that acreage into native plants, and we've saved the taxpayers a lot of dollars. We made it, I think, a lot more beautiful. You take a walk around Maywatt's pond over there, or Wildflower Park, the pond over there. Those are beautiful settings in the midsummer time. So, and I think people are happy to walk the trails and the paths around those areas more than just looking at the turf.
Oh, I would agree. I mean, I think people have noticed and are, looking at, the native grasses and then looking at their own landscaping in their own yard, thinking, I don't want to work that hard. How do I replace that and turn it in that 3-year time period?
Yeah.
And 3 years is a great return on an investment.
Absolutely. So I think the economy side of the picture hit home to the rest of the board members along the way, that this is what we ought to be doing. So I think the efforts that we've done here around the Nature Center, the efforts that we're doing in Sportsman's, and we've done Pioneer Park, an extensive native restoration area over there. So we've got plans to continue that, and Peggy Pelkonen has done a great job of design and installation on a lot of that. So she's my go-to person on Park District native stuff, and I depend on her for advice. And she's the one that I went to that we haven't touched upon, the Idea Gardens, and that has grown out of this recognized need that homeowners are looking for help on how to do their home landscaping, and to do it sustainably, to do it successfully, to do it not on the cheap, but with some economy in mind. And so that's part of the reasons that I created the Idea Gardens over there by the garden plots.
Well, it's funny because you sent me the brochure about the Idea Garden. I thought, God, that's a great name. And I'm not thinking Idea Garden as needing to help the homeowner. I'm thinking I could sit there peacefully and write down some great things that I want to do, get some great ideas going. So I think it could benefit both.
Yeah, for whatever purpose. And I've seen people sitting over at the picnic table, just got their tablet out there, they're pounding away, but they're just sitting there having a cup of coffee and then just relaxing.
So let's talk a little bit about the Idea Garden, since we have it here. We're going to circle back around, but we are kind of at a good place because homeowners don't necessarily know what they want. I mean, most of us drive around and say, gee, I like that, I like this, and then maybe take it over to a landscaper and then have sticker shock.
Yeah.
Sticker shock and also maintenance shock, that the things they like don't fit into their yard because it's not the same sunny setup or soil or garden stuff that you know more about.
Yep.
So you've got this Idea Garden going. In what phases are in place, and where's it going?
It started out as kind of a marketing tool, because when I took over for the garden plots as a master gardener for a men's garden club member, had done it 25 years and had done all the produce over loaves and fishes. He almost did it single-handedly. And now in 2011, when I started with those four, I had 25 master gardeners doing what he was doing all by himself. So we worked hard at that, but I said we need something to let folks know we're here. So I needed structure, I needed some sort of visibility. So we put another plot, 20 by 30 area. The Park District put some split rail fence around it, and we put all native plants in there. And at the beginning of that process, Jim Kleinwachter from the Conservation Foundation came out. He gave me advice on which plants to select, and I had him screen my plant list. Jack Pizzo, who I mentioned, he also screened my plant list and made some suggestions. So we had 25 species of plant in this 20 by 30, 600 square foot area. And we moved a kiosk that had been over by the entranceway between the south and north garden plots. I don't know if you recall that. We moved that over there as structure. So 2011 we had the split split rail fence, the native plant demonstration garden, I called it. The 4 plots got flooded out twice. That we were, us master gardeners, got flooded out, had to replant. So we started all over a couple times, and we said, we need to deal with stormwater a little better. So we created a rain garden.
Wow.
Right behind there. And we put 3 rain barrels up, kind of artificially. You normally put them at the end of downspouts. But again, it was to add the visibility and marketing tool along the way. And we used them to water the vegetables. So we had a rain garden in 2012. The Park District added their tagline, engage your senses. Sensory garden. Rang the bell. So that's when I called on Peggy and I said, would you design us a sensory garden? I wanted a little bit more landscaping architects thing than Ori's backyard gardening techniques, and she did a great job of laying that out. So we installed in 2013 the sensory garden. I also was taking class for the Master Naturalist thing. So I was interested in prairies and further extended use of native plants. So last year we began the installation of savanna, a sedge meadow, and a prairie garden. Meanwhile, the Boy Scouts are looking for something to do, and I said, we could use some help. So one scout put in a demonstration compost area. The second one extended the screens that we had used to separate the industrial area from the idea gardens. And I use gardens because it's not just one garden, it's
Right.
more than one. Make that separation, so we added 3 more panels. My brother Kevin and I had put the first 3 panels up and did all of the hardscape installation according to Peggy's plan. That scout put that in, and the scout leader said, that's not enough for an Eagle Scout project. So he's also installed a shortgrass prairie in behind there between that and the road. So he's got about 1,500 square feet of shortgrass prairie. And we'll see how well it grows in. It was seeded last October. And the third one is putting interpretive signage. And that brochure that I sent you was used as being used as the background to create the signs. And the signs are just going to be kind of a lead-in.
Sure.
With a link to another website, a database. I've got a list of 90 plants in there that give you the soil conditions, the season of bloom, the color, the height of those. So that's kind of a shopping list that people have asked me, why don't you sell that? I said, you can get it for nothing. I'll give it to you, that kind of information. So all the advice is free. All of the money has been donated. So it's not been taxpayer dollars. We've gotten $4,000 in the past. We have another $1,000 for the budget for this year. I was out to a garden, Longwood Gardens near Philadelphia, which is a really famous garden. It's an old DuPont estate. And I went to their idea garden, and I saw a labyrinth, and the kids were all over it, hopping around and following the path.
That's a great idea.
So we're going to put a labyrinth in the picnic area for the kids.
That's nice.
Yeah, so it's just about at maturity this year. By the end of the summer, hopefully we'll have that pretty well along. The signs will go up in the spring. Angelique from here has been providing some technical advice to the youngster to make sure his project goes well, and then hopefully we have some recognition at a park board or a celebration out there to recognize these scouts. Got another scout in mind, and he's got too many other things on the plate, but he's still interested in redoing the picnic tables. So there's 4 of them that have really contributed mightily out there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I think it's a great idea. I think people drive by the garden plots and think, gee, I should either do that, but I don't have enough knowledge, or I just like to stop by. And here they have a great area to stop by and wander around and, maybe
catch some ideas, and hopefully with the signs they'll be able to, learn directly. That you won't have to have somebody, but if not, I'll be out there on occasion.
On occasion. They can recognize you and ask a question. Now, you've been on the park board for 20 years.
Right.
Yeah. So are there a couple standout moments for you that you thought great, or that maybe you wanted to get off? What comes to mind when you look back on those 20 years?
Well, I think when I got on the board in '95, and I looked at the balance sheet, and there was a red number on the balance sheet. It was like 500,000 in the hole.
Wow.
And that was because the very conservative board took action to freeze taxes. I mean, none of them went up for about a 4-year period, 5-year period of time. When the tax cap legislation went into effect in '92, it was passed in '91, but in '92 it went into effect. And then from '92 to '96, the taxes for the Park District were flat. So, and that's when we had, growth of assessments was going skyrocketing, and so they did not take advantage of that. So as costs were going up in the Park District and the taxes were staying this way or even declining a little bit along the way, you can see where the red number came from. So I don't blame the board for taking a conservative approach. Naperville's a conservative town, but a couple of us said we need to probably maximize the tax within the tax cap. So we ballooned the levy. Nobody paid attention to it. So ever since the '96 tax year, we've been maximizing what we can under the tax cap and have been able to achieve some financial stability. We've been able to grow our reserves. There's a couple other reasons for that too, so that we're able to do some of these big projects, like build this facility here, to do the activity center. So, our fund balance may look like we got a lot of cash on hand, but come the end of next year, that'll be down to a more recognizable number. So the financial aspect of that along the way. I think we've done a great job. Sustainability, I think we've, like you say, become a leader in the community to environmental sustainability. The Green Team that has been created at the staff is now a go-to organization that the city has looked at along the way, and we've recognized by Scarce, by the county, received Conservation Foundation awards for sustainability. So we've done a great job. One of the telling things was when we interviewed Ray for the executive director, he had a chance to ask us questions. He said, "What's your environmental policy?" What's your environmental policy? Nobody answered him. We didn't have one. So Ray's done a good job of getting that cranked up. So, between alternative fuels and methods for running vehicles and taking a look at whether we need to change playgrounds every 15 years, if they're still, viable and good shape, we extend the life of them. So we've done across the board, we've done a great job on that, so sustainability. And I think our planning. In the Army, what did I learn from the Army? I learned about leadership. I learned about discipline. But for about the last 10 years of my Army career, I was at a strategic level in the planning department. One of those was defense of the oil fields, and that's a big thing when you talk the whole Mideast on how to, and I was in logistics, so I knew the implications of logistic planning. And we didn't have a strategic plan. We didn't have a long-term finance plan. We had a capital overview type thing that nobody was willing to share or make public. When we went for the '99 referendum, I don't know if you remember that, and I was a lone holdout, and I said, unless you have a master plan in front of me, I'm not going to vote for this. Well, the night that vote came up, they had a master plan in front of me. And it was a big, thick book, and it was well done, but it had not been put out to the public along the way. So we've done a great job on planning, various plans along the way. So we've got alternative revenue, which I strongly believe in, that we shouldn't just burden the either the program users or for fees or the taxpayers through their property taxes. There are a lot of people that want to help out. So the foundation, I think, is starting to get going along the way. I've been pushing for that for almost 20 years. And so it's starting to get some traction. Sue Almanson has done a tremendous job on getting grants, and the money that, if they weighed her, I think she would not approach the amount of gold that her weight has provided. She's been tremendous in that regard. So we've developed a sound financial footing. We've got some long-term plans. We've got focus with a good mission statement, and we've got well-trained staff. So I think we're in good hands.
I think you are in good hands, and there's been a lot of movement in the last 10 years with the Park District. Just a lot of great additions, whether it be redoing of Nike Park, whether it be this building we're sitting in now, whether it be looking ahead towards the indoor space, the final recognition of how we need some indoor space. That's going to be really impressive.
Yeah, I think, as Ray says, the special needs families are really underserved when they got to drive up to Addison to find a place for their kids to participate in the program. That's kind of a burden on them along the way. So the emphasis is on special needs, but it's also on fundamental. I'm, not a big thing to compete in the fitness arena. There are a number of fitness and gyms operating in the territory. And the fitness aspect of this, I was sold on this because it's going to be beginners. We are, in the Park District, teach fundamental skills, basic skills. And this hit home early on. 20 years ago, I set up a little program, Coffee with the Commissioner, because there's pre-internet, we had no means of communicating with a whole lot of folks. So Saturday mornings, I'd sit in the Park District admin building, had the coffee pot there and some donut holes, and one lady came in and said, "Why don't you have piano 3?" And it sort of rocked me back, and I didn't have an answer. So I went to the park staff, and why don't we have piano 3? We teach fundamental skills. We teach piano 1 and piano 2. And if you get to the Olympic level of expertise, then they'll spin off, and you have to do that privately. And that's the way for example, the soccer clubs. Park District had a great soccer program, thanks to Mrs. Sonnenberg, I think, is the lady. That's another thing I'd like to see. Where's our Hall of Fame for the Park District? We'll have one of these days, and she ought to be in it. So the programs that we have teach fundamental skills. Fundamental gardening, fundamental soccer, fundamental piano, whatever it may be. Fundamental fitness, exercise. So we're not power lifters. We're not going to be teaching them that. So
no, but you're going to be providing a lovely indoor track for some walking, and that I think is
absolutely
so needed. And I think the Park District, going to the fundamental skill thing, it's an introduction, so that if you're wanting to try piano, if you're wanting to try gardening, you get to try it, but you're not out a lot of money if that doesn't go your way, or find out you don't want to do it. Or if you want to do it, then you can continue on, but you can grow from the Park District. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, there's been a couple of Olympic athletes and so forth, and I got a niece that got full ride scholarship for soccer, and she started out 4 years old in the Park District soccer program. So it does lead for some people to some intense effort along the way, and highly successful. So for others, it's there's no one else that does that.
Right.
The schools have got the basics that they do, but there's some of these fundamental life skills, if you will, are the responsibility of the Park District.
That's awesome. Well, the Park District has been so helpful to many other people, many other groups. The Riverwalk, the Riverwalk, tremendous asset. Cared for by the Park District, maintained by the Park District. A lot of the Century Walk stuff maintained by the Park District. I think that's a big asset. And with talking about the Century Walk a little bit, tell me a little bit about the Doughboy. You had a little bit of involvement with the Doughboy.
Terry Jelinek and I were co-chairs of the committee that helped do the fundraising for that along the way. And that was kind of planted the seed for a Naperville Parks Foundation. And it took a while to get going, but that was where we were at. And what we did is we worked with the veterans along the way, and worked with Bram Bobowski and Century Walk, and that was great fun. Selling flags for $5 or $10 so we had several hundred people that made a contribution. So when you get people to buy into it, and when they can claim ownership, that's my Doughboy, and you get several hundred people to do that, that was great fun. That was great fun. And I took a trip out to the Foundry where they were recasting it, and went through the Foundry with the artist out there. I forget, over in Michigan, just outside of Detroit, one wintry day, about like today is. But he showed me around, and Dee Pasternak was the driving force on that.
Yeah.
She was part of the Century Walk, and she had that bit in her mouth, and she wasn't going to let go. She made it happen. So it was great fun. It was very successful and very rewarding. And as a veteran, I thoroughly had an interest in that. Yeah,
I'm sure it touched home for you there.
But touching home, I grew up a block from that park.
Sure.
And my brother said, is that the statue where we used to throw pumpkins and have them speared on the bayonet along the way? I said, yeah, but that rifle's missing. Did you take it, Les? And, no. So, yeah, I grew up in that park.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's extra special. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. One of the things I think that people might not know about you with the Park District is, because we think of you as the master gardener, is the child safety law. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, that seemed to be, just a non-brainer, for crying out loud, and yet we couldn't get it through.
Right, but
it couldn't get it through anybody. And so Mary Lou Collishaw finally picked up on it, and she fought like the Dickens with her fellow legislators. This is, one of the remarks that was said by one of the representatives in one of the hearings was, boys will be boys. My golly, that's a bad attitude to take on this whole thing. So it took literally years for that legislation to get through, and I'm very happy that we were successful in that.
Well, it was a little bit of a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well, we've got hundreds of teenagers that are on staff that are dealing with youngsters all over the Park District, and we want to make sure those kids are safe. And they are.
Right, and that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, made perfect sense then, but why some people had objections, I don't know. Politics.
Yeah, it is
part of politics.
It is well, and it's probably, it's amazing sometimes how, a park board can, have a lot of politics, so.
Oh, yeah.
So many people are thinking, okay, you're retiring, it's been 20 years. We know you're going to spend some time with the Idea Garden. What else are you planning to do?
Well, I'll continue my yearly trek along one of the trails along the way. I'll certainly keep photography, that interest, and I hopefully can get a little bit more involved in the foundation as a park board member. It's kind of a distant type thing, so hopefully I can get a little bit more involved in that. So I think we can. I'm not going anywhere. This is home. I'm sticking around. I'll still be involved in the Park District for many years to come.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I'm thrilled to hear that. So that the Park Foundation is going to gain a real big advocate with you, I feel certain. And then the garden plots will continue on. I'm sure I'll see you out there. Ron, thanks for taking a few minutes and sharing your story and telling me a little bit about you and your time here. I learned a lot. I thought I knew a lot about you, but I learned even more. So it's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you.
And thank you for your service.
Appreciate it. You're welcome.